Did you have family in Nepal or anything like that?
I have one of my friends who studied in seminary. He's there. They have
I
one
printed
more.
out all this stuff and I read through a bunch of it. What is tonight like topic?
Tonight's topic is having to do with a little snippet of what's in each category that we would address if we're going through the full year program. So it's not in that reading. I did send something out. It's not even specific to the 6 topic areas like we'll cover tonight, because the topic areas will be written and you'll have those as you go through the 6 courses. So it'll just be a peek into what that looks like. And then also what I did is in the writing is I opened up a concept that how I view counseling theories. It kind of goes from last week and then brings it in a little bit more specific to how I view it now. And I'll address that a little bit. So it'll be something to read, but it's not specific for all the time. So, okay, we'll get started on the last, week 4 of intro to applied biblical psychology. Now, I'd like to leave time in the evening at the end to discuss what your overall perception of this was. So this is a peek into what's to come. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to work. Did we have this happen last week? No. Oh, at least it's not working there either. All right, let me try one thing real quick.
Was she, who delivered the flowers, was she like, her hair was about 2 right here, kind of curly? Did you deliver
Brown hair.
Oh, it wasn't her. She's a scientist. She was really nice.
Dance.
Okay.
Something
All right. So in looking at what's to come if we did go for the full year, I first want to start, and this is what I wrote in the document that I sent you, theory versus techniques. So this is a whole different view I haven't seen out there currently too much. I think actually a lot of people believe it, but it hasn't been written down so far. And that is that as you look at the field of psychology as it's developed in the United States, a lot of the founders in the different theories of psychology, their theory is basically themselves explained. So when they are developing a concept of why people do what they do, they're absolutely looking at their life experiences. And then they are seeing what worked for them. They're seeing for what worked for those around them, patterns that they saw if they were working in therapy with people, to interpret and to explain why people do what they do. So in the document I sent, it's extremely clear because it goes through the personal lives, just a little bit of each of these people. For example, with Freud, his mom was odd. He had no relationship with his dad, hardly at all. His mom bathed him until he was about 11. And there was no evidence that there was something actually sexual, but it seemed like the situation where maybe Freud replaced her husband in some kind of an odd way. And even as his daughter, later, in working with his daughter, he would interpret her sexual fantasies. And it was a very awkward, weird situation. He had a lot within how he came to view people that at first glance, you would think it's extreme. Everything seemed to revolve around sex. But if you look at his past, there was a reason for that. And that was who he is as a person. He dealt with that, and he explained life based off of that. There's other examples of people. One wonderful one is Frankl. Viktor Frankl had a theory called existentialism, and blank, it's gone. It's probably existentialism. I'll double check. But the idea is you have to take responsibility for what you do. And you would tell a person, you're not depressed, you're depressing. Stop it. Get over it. You make choices every day. That's why you are where you're at. So bad things happen all the time. If you look at something that's bad, you could just take it and turn it around and make it good. You can't control what comes to you or what events happen, but you can control how you respond to those events, how you interpret them, and how you respond to those events. That will dictate your life, not actually the event. Well, Viktor Frankl was a survivor from a concentration camp during the Holocaust. All of what he believed came through. He thought love was going to conquer all. That as long as you could hold to love and faith, you as a human could survive everything. He also thought that that it was important for each person to look at death honestly, and he would call it death or non-being, depending on your belief system, but he thought that was important because if he thought we could honestly look at death, then we would appreciate life. So you could see, wow, fantastic. Good ideas in how he looked at the world and tried to explain his universe, his surroundings, his life, and his personal experience was absolutely interwoven into his theory. And that can be pretty much taken for every great theorist. Some of the theories, they are maybe 4 or 5 people that all came to be a part of how this theory developed, and it's not so clear-cut that it's a person's life turning into a theory, but many of the foundational theorists, that's exactly what is there. Their life is being explained, and as they explain it, they offer it to everyone else. Here's my explanation for why people do what they do. Here's my explanation for how to find health. So even though there's wonderful aspects of each, the message, if you really look at all the theories, is that not one theory explains everything. You just as an analytical person, not even a Christian, you look at theories and you think, wow, that's fantastic. What in the world were they thinking here? Usually as a counselor, as a psychologist, anyone in this field takes theories and looks and says, wow, this is fantastic. This doesn't fit me, it doesn't fit my personality, it doesn't make sense to me, or as a believer, it doesn't fit a biblical worldview. So as we take theories and we look at them and analyze them, we keep some of the information we find valuable and we discard the rest. This is a typical process for any therapist, absolutely a process that most Christians take in how to manage psychology and a biblical worldview. Where I'm headed, though, is that the Bible does give a foundation for an explanation on humans that's very thorough and actually addresses all of the main topics that psychology is trying to address. And it addresses it very clearly. And if we come with the belief that the Bible is the Word of God and truth, then we can actually start with a theory and explanation of humans that is accurate, that we can count on, and that is comprehensive. And there's actually nothing like that existing in the field of psychology today. So that's where I'm headed. And by the time you get there, I'll be there because I'm in this process of writing and describing and organizing for you. And so that will be toward the end because that will be the full application. All this knowledge, now here's what you do with it. The fun part of this, though, is all of those theories really do have very specific tools that are easy to use and valuable. So anybody could take one of the techniques and use it right away. Some are more complicated, but pretty much there's just a huge list of techniques that anybody could learn and use right away. So the nice thing about having a biblical foundation starting is once we have an explanation of humans, it will be the logical conclusion that any effective tool will be available to us. There will likely be no reason that a tool that works well would not fit within our model and our theory. So we will be able to have basically, if you will, the best of both worlds. We will really have an explanation of humans, and we already have this. When you're just seeing it described, you're going to see Bible describe it. But if somebody else was reading it, it would look like a wonderful explanation for humans, but we know it comes straight from the Bible. And then on the other side, you will be able to give tools to pastors, to lay counselors, to Christians, where in a way that they will feel very comfortable, because it will come from a biblical foundation. Hold on one second. They should be there in a minute. Oh, I'm good. Okay, checking on. Get back. Okay. Okay. Let's see. So, also to set up a context, even though that's what we've been doing this whole time, this is important though. There is no way, nearly no way, for me to be prepared to give you an entire doctorate degree of psychology in a year without actually having a doctorate of psychology, unless I do very strategic. And so part of my repetition is that, and part of me building a context is to have a filing cabinet in your brain that when I give you something, you can put it somewhere. So that's part of how I keep dividing it in sections and repeating myself. So remember, going back, we have a broad perspective of humans from creation till today. So that'll be somewhere that you'll have to keep that in your mind always, is remembering our systematic explanation of humans, from why God created us, how he created us, the purpose we had in humans and families, and how that has been seen through scripture all the way till today, and we're given a peek into the future of what's to come. So that broad perspective has to be there. The perspective, again, that matches that with a little differences sometimes, is Genesis to Revelation. Then a broad perspective of a biblical worldview. What does the Bible to say on families? What does the Bible say on sex? What does the Bible say on relationships? What does the Bible say on all these topics? We need to have a broad context. So we already need to know our Bible. And that's where that I'm going to push people in that direction first if they don't come with that. We need to know what does the Bible say and biblical authority. So for every topic we come to within counseling and psychology, we're going to need to know, what does the Bible say about it? And then whatever we think we're studying, and we'll talk about this in a moment, science and research, whatever we think we're studying, the Bible is the ultimate authority. This is a presupposition. I am now imposing on you, but that's how I'm going to come, is that the Bible is the ultimate authority. And we remember through history many, many times that it seemed like science had something that was contrary to the Bible, and then it turned out science was wrong and the Bible was accurate the entire time. That has been proven many times. It has not been that science has proven the Bible wrong, ever. So we have a good stance, not just from faith. And then process of scientific study and findings. We'll look at this actually in the first class a little bit more in human development, because it's important for you to understand, if we're saying we're taking a biblical worldview and we're studying people, what does it mean to study people? How do you do a research study? You're going to be reading the results of research, and what I'm going to be doing is filtering it all and just giving you the results of the research. But if you wanted to find out how I came to the conclusions, if you wanted to know if what I'm telling you is accurate, I would want you to have a general idea of where the information comes from and the process that it takes to do research. Because the bottom line is, in psychology, in every science, but definitely in psychology, people will take information and skew statistics, and you could have inaccurate information very easily. You can make numbers say anything. So to be able to read an article and say, here's what we found, then to go back to the original research and then see how many do they have in the sample. Were there 5 people they studied, or were there 5,000? Was it one location in a remote area, or was it people throughout the entire United States or the entire world? Was it just the prison population, which is most studies? Was it prison population or average people? And so to understand just the basic idea of how good research is conducted will help us know if we're looking at something from human development and we think, oh, I like this. This is good information I can use. How do you know it's accurate? I will do my due diligence, not to give you something unless I believe it's accurate, but I want you to have a general idea of how I do that, how I see if research is It's actually quality before I use it as new information in my worldview and how I'm going to help you. Okay, and then how can information be applied? So this is with other professions as well. The closely related one I think of is creation studies. There's scientific evidence for young earth. There's scientific evidence that God created the world. It's also matched with evidence of evolution, and it's basically how you interpret the evidence based on your presuppositions. So there's a lot of flaws in how people will look at evidence and say, you know, for example, I know it's this millions of years old because I found it in this rock layer. How do you know the rock layer is that old? Well, because we came up with this, you know, measurement. How'd you come up with that measurement? You know, so at the same time, they're saying, here's the same evidence we see here. Creationists will use it to prove a young earth. Evolutionists will use it to prove an old earth. That we have to have a way to figure out what information is accurate that we can turn around and apply it, and what's going to look like when we apply it. So we'll have this process just like any other science of studying it to get new information that will change how we think, that will give us something to use. Okay? All right. So in human growth and development, we're just going to go through a tiny little example, 2 examples of a tool that you can use.
I was wondering, I think you can put us a chart actually in all these theories.
You
know,
don't.
It was easy for us to, for lay people like us to get.
Yes, yes. And are you thinking of the stages or the theories?
No, the theories.
Very good.
I was going through that, these, as you said, each one has some one point or something that we can use. It is useful. You know, we can just write off everything. Right?
Yes, yes.
So, but we can see in columns and with Bible answers,
Yep.
so it's easy for us to digest it faster than just one week.
Yes, I can do that. I can do that. I think that's going to be important and helpful. It's going to be difficult to pick what do you include. And somebody will read themselves and say, this is what you thought of me, there's so much more. So it's hard, you know, it's hard to narrow down like that. But I do think it would be very valuable. So we'll do it. And we'll see what the process is like. Okay, so stages of development, and actually I did print a PDF. I did not remember to bring it. I have it. I can email it just to have a short view of all this. But first, we're just going to look at basic stages of development. So it's Erikson's stages of development. Erikson's was a little bit more on the Freud side, but he came up with a way to view development of humans in stages. He did not think that the stages had to be in the set order necessarily, or the set age range that he gave them, but that there was this pattern he saw in people. And he thought that if you were not able to conquer a certain stage, you would have consequences in your adult life because of that, and that it would be difficult to move on to the next stage. And so you might have a 50-year-old person that's stuck in a stage of infancy or a stage of preschool, and some of their behaviors might look like a temper tantrum because they weren't able, you know, to move to the stage where they're supposed to learn strategies and not have temper tantrums. So he had the stage view of how people develop, but as we go through it, I think you'll find there's a lot of value. And one value that I find is for parents to understand what to expect from the children during the different ages, and how to handle their children and be with their children during the different ages. And the concept is how you are with the different ages will have an impact further on in life. Okay? Now, when we're in human growth and development, we'll start with, what does the Bible say about development? Is there any scriptures that do give, you know, foundation to any of this? And you'll be able to recognize some as you go through. But, you know, there are some verses that address parenting and parenting skills that might match up with this as well. But one specific one I think of is when it tells fathers not to exacerbate their children. That matches up with stuff that comes from Erikson. So we want to see what scripture has to say, and we also want to filter, you know, what we're learning if there's anything that's contradictory to scripture. But in general, Erikson would say when an infant's born, that kind of their main goal, what they're supposed to accomplish being an infant, will either lead to basic trust or basic mistrust of the world. And that the job in an infant is to have needs and have those needs met by the primary caregiver. You know, there's a little debate before whether it has to be the mom or another primary caregiver, but a lot of research supports the mom. But definitely a primary caregiver, that if the baby cries or has a poopy diaper or is hungry, that the primary caregiver takes care of that child's needs. And that as soon as that poopy diaper is changed, what's learned within the child is when I have, you know, a problem, a need, my needs met. That, you know, I am sad and now I'm comforted. I have a poopy diaper, now I feel good, I have a clean diaper. And this whole process builds internally within themselves a sense that everything's going to turn out okay. So what it leads to adulthood is hope. But if this is met at a very young age in infancy, that there is a more optimism, trust, confidence that the world is a good place. That things, even if bad things come, in the end they'll work out okay. If you don't have that, if you don't have your needs met or in a timely manner, or there's conflicting messages, sometimes I get my needs met, sometimes I don't, then it builds within a child hopelessness, insecurity, and the general feel that things might not turn out okay. The world is out to get me. The world is not going to provide for me, or things won't turn out well. And for me as a clinician working with teenage girls who were taken out of their homes because of abuse and lived in foster care and lived in group homes, working with them, this is very, very consistent. In a general broad theme through almost every single one of these girls' lives was the lack of hope. They thought everything will turn out bad, why even try? I've tried and it always turned out bad. They had a very extreme view on that. No sense of hope that it's something that they could do would change their life. It was deep within them, and they didn't have the needs met when they were infants at all. That was one of the biggest problems. Any comments on this of how you can see this? Does it register as something that makes sense? Okay, so we'll, yes, does it make sense? We're using our brains. Is there anything that goes against Scripture, something that could be supported by Scripture? That's what we'll look for here. And again, even with these stages, there's value. It doesn't mean it explains everything. There's just value that comes from it. But I would tell a parent, change poopy diapers. If they're hungry, feed them. Provide for their needs, love, comfort, that builds in that child something that will last a lifetime. Okay? Toddler, ages 18 months to 3 years. This is a battle between autonomy versus shame and doubt. Okay? So this is where the child develops a will, and everybody knows it because, you know, we have our titles for it. It seems to drag out past 2 sometimes, but it's the terrible twos. And the thing I like about this idea, this concept, is at least to normalize it for parents. This is not an insane thing that the child has having these reactions. It is normal. This is the stage they're in. This is really good for them. Doesn't mean you don't discipline. It means that their job during that time is to feel like they're a person separate from their parent. And where this can go wrong is if a parent is so controlling, they never allow the kid to have a different like than they like, or a different, anything different from them. Then they don't know who they are as an individual, as a kid. They only think they are a mini parent, a part of that parent. There's no separation between the parent and the child. And that can lead to shame later on in life, not knowing who they are, and a sense that who they are is bad. And that's the difference between shame and maybe discipline, or understanding that they have to, obey the rules or not hit their sister. That shame is not you've done something wrong. Shame is you are a bad person. Who you are is a bad person. And because children at this age are so concrete and not able to get a huge amount of why there's rules and some of those, that it's a normal process of them. They're going to be set up to throw a temper tantrum or to, want their way. And it's the parent's job to correct that and teach them and manage them, but not to make that kid feel like they're a bad kid because of it. It's actually normal. It's actually part of the process. So if that child somehow has a sense of who they are separate from the parent in this stage, without having shame that whatever they do is that they are a bad person, then within themselves they'll have more of that sureness of who they are, and they'll have likes and dislikes. I usually say you don't have to like your piece, but you have to eat them. So it's a difference. So a parent that is too controlling, you have to like the peas. Like them, they taste good, eat them. But the child thinks, I don't think they taste good. And they could be confused by that. Okay, they taste good, they're disgusting. So they don't have to like the peas, but you have to eat them because they're healthy for you, so eat them. Does that make sense? So they're going to know their likes and dislikes. They're going to have a sense of pride. I'll never forget a therapist telling a story of her son, climbing the top of a very dangerous pile of poles or something. And at the top, he's just like, look at me, Mom. And he's so filled with pride. And as a mom, she wanted to run and grab him and slap him and like, don't you ever do something that's so dangerous? And she had to say, wow, that's amazing. And then grab him as fast as she could because it's dangerous. But, it's that battle as a parent to let them have that sense of pride, in something that they've done and not crush them at the same time keeping them safe. So I do talk to parents about a balancing act there, but the idea is if they are shamed when they do something to keep who they are intact, that's where the problem will be later. That they might have low self-esteem, they might struggle with shame in general, they might have that sense of I'm bad as a person who I am. Okay? Any questions on that?
It's hard to do that.
Yes, definitely. That's why I think there is a piece inside us that tells parents, all right, here you go. This is what you're going to do. God, I guess, the Holy Spirit specifically. Okay, Erickson in preschool. The overall topic kind of presented and what they're supposed to be learning and receiving is purpose. And it could go to initiative or guilt. Initiative, meaning they're adventurous to try new things, discover, create. I don't want to use creative because I actually don't say that, but they're discovering versus guilt. And where this comes in is natural. They start to mimic everything. They start to role play. They start to pick up something and pretend like it's a phone. They copy everything their parents do. I love this in preschool age if I'm working in church because you can see the parents because the children talk exactly like the parents. And so you can see a picture into the house right there because they're copying everything their parents do. So that is a normal process. They're learning who they're supposed to be as a person, how to communicate, social norms. They're learning everything by watching and copying the parent. If in that process, though, they're not able to be adventurous in what they're role playing and practicing and mimicking and everything else, then that can be crushed and shut down, and the result is guilt. That they must be doing something wrong. Because remember, half the time kids can't figure out why the adult is frustrated that they're acting out that certain way. So with this, it's just the knowing that the normal process to role play and play with their friends, pretend like they're mini adults, and to have that freedom and creativity to, if nothing else, play. And it's interesting because we'll talk about brain development, but that's actually greatly decreased in our society. We are moving towards kind of Japanese, Korean philosophy of education, and we're taking out recess, taking out play, and increasing homework. But actually, intelligence is more linked to play during young years than anything else, because it's how our brain develops. So we'll look at that in a moment. But this is an important part. They need to play at this age. Okay, school age. They're learning competence, industry versus inferiority. So they're learning, they're creating, they're with their peers, they're comparing with their peers. Are they able to do something and do something well? And this is important because if a parent is expecting perfection when they're at this age, they're going to always feel like they're never measuring up. And that's where the inferiority can come in. Or if the child isn't good at something and they're always in the environment where that's what they're doing, for example, if they're always put in sports but they are not athletic, then they always get a feeling of, I'm not as good as everybody else. And inside that's going to internally affect them for the rest of their life. All these things you can overcome, but it will be something against them. So even if a parent could have them find something that they're good at to be involved in, so they have that sense of accomplishment, I did it, and I did it well. That can have a huge impact on that sense of who they are later on in life. So finding ways for them to be able to be adventurous and try new things, not be ridiculed if they're not good at it, but let them be adventurous to try things. And then if they are literally not good at things and you can see it comparative with friends and peers, then find another environment, find something for them to be involved in that they can be good at. That will be a way to help this stage specifically. And if this goes well, you have confidence and high self-esteem. If it does not, they are consistently measuring themselves with others and feeling inadequate, and a low self-esteem could be something that they struggle with. Any questions on this? Makes sense. Okay, adolescence. So what adolescence is very vague at this point. It keeps stretching out to about 25 now, so who knows. But the idea here is to find identity, who I am as a person, versus role confusion. And you know, it could be a lot of other issues coming in. It could be sexual identity, gender identity concepts, but more than that. So who I am, do I identify as somebody that loves sports? Do I identify, you know, what am I identifying as who I am as a person? Obviously, this is where the Bible can come in very powerfully, because if a person can identify and find their identity and who they are in Christ, then it's a different type of identity, security that can last a lifetime in a very powerful way. So not having to measure based on how they are in different areas in sports, in school, are they smart, are they a friend, you know, all these other roles, but first and foremost who they are in Christ, that can have a huge impact in not needing to find who they are in other areas. They can have that security. But in general, a normal process is seeing where do they fit in? Where do they, what social groups are they affiliated with? Do they have friends? It's where friends come in as a big piece of their life. And if they can get through this stage well, they have a sense of who they are everywhere they go. You know, young adult years, trying to get into the job market and maybe higher education, it's all going to be easier because they have a sense of who they are, that self-esteem and confidence built in by making it out of the stage well. Otherwise, they're struggling with the question, and we see this often today, in early 20s and stretched out sometimes to 30, 35, who am I? You know, this identity crisis. Who am I and why am I here? And again, remember, just to build in a little bit of an extra context, of course we have that with people who believe they're animals. We're not created in God's image. There's no sense of meaning and purpose in life. I think all of that has a huge impact very strongly in this specific stage. Who am I? All right, young adult, intimacy versus isolation. So this is typically when somebody develops a strong, intimate relationships. It doesn't actually necessarily mean sex. Obviously, in a biblical worldview, you wouldn't want somebody to have sex before marriage, but it could be that they get married and it could be sex. But in general, that they seek companionship, love, intimacy on a very deep level. Not superficial, not just friends. It goes to a very deep level. And it does not have to be a romantic relationship. It could be a friendship where friendships change. You go through more. You go through having kids together or something. It could be a friendship that is deeper than was experienced in adolescence. So it's ability to have intimacy. And if somebody cannot connect with another person like that in a deep way, there's a sense of isolation that can linger in future years. A sense of being alone, even if other people are there. Does this make sense? Okay. Middle-aged, which when I was looking at the age, I'm like, let's just stop this whole stupid topic. But I'm seeing myself being in a different category. That's just scary. So middle-aged, I don't know if I could actually pronounce this, generativity versus self-absorption or stagnation. So this is typically a time when somebody is having a career, work, responsibilities. What's interesting is there's a category where you might have a stay-at-home mom that is not in this, and you might find them at this stage after their kids are 18 and move out, and they actually jump in this role versus the next one. So in general, though, hopefully they have a sense of mastery at their job somehow, that they have achieved the high level where they're at in their work environment. So young adult, they're starting out, they're adventurous, they might try several jobs. In middle-aged time frame, you hope that they get to the point where they have succeeded in something. There's a purpose in something, they've mastered it. And if they are through this stage well, they have a sense that they've made a difference somehow. Now, Erikson cared very much about society. Everything was related to the good of society. I don't know if I care so much about that, but making a difference I would. He would say making a difference in society, I would easily put, for the kingdom, or something with my biblical worldview would come in more powerfully there. But that you made a difference. And I think all of us, you can tell within us, have that sense. What am I supposed to be doing? What does God want me to do? You want to do something big, something important. It makes a difference for him. And if you have not gone through the stage well, you'll have a sense of inactivity or meaninglessness. And you might have people, maybe they lost their job, and they're addicted to internet or games, video games, things like that, where they're in middle-aged time frame, but they're not doing anything. And they have a sense of meaningless, and that is going to basically stagnate them. They're not going to be moving or come to some kind of fruition or completion in life. They're just going to be paused and stagnant. Okay? And then the last one, late adulthood, defined as wisdom, integrity versus despair. So the time when you start thinking, this life's going to end. What have I done? And so you look back and you either see, I have a meaningful life, I have tangible things that I can say, I'm coming out of this life, well, I've contributed. Again, Erikson would say contributed to society, but do you have a family, heritage? Do you have a legacy you're leaving somehow? What can you see that's left from your life? And if you see things that are meaningful, you have a sense of integrity, and you actually have a sense of peace typically. Now, remember, this is a stage, so maybe it's not there at the beginning, but it's there at the end. But you have a sense of, I'm ready. You may not want to die, but you're ready. You feel good. You've done well. Versus a sense of despair. It's over. It's all over, and I've done nothing. What was it all for? Why was I here in the first place? I have nothing to show for it. And what's interesting is there is a huge problem with depression in older adults. And sometimes they interpret the symptoms of depression from just being old. And they don't actually know that the person's depressed, and it could be something that's manageable and actually come out of depression to enjoy the rest of their years. They figure it's a part of being old, and they don't actually treat the depression. There's a high rate of suicide in the elderly, and there's a high rate of just the symptoms of depression that might be irritability and anger, and some of those that we don't always attribute that to depression, but it very much are symptoms of depression. Some people are sad, but for example, a lot of men, if they're depressed, they're angry. A lot of kids, if they're depressed, they're irritable. So you don't think of it in those terms, but in the older population, sometimes they're grouchy and irritable, and you think, oh, they're just old. They actually could be depressed. That could be a depression that could be treated, and they wouldn't actually be like that, and they could enjoy the rest of their life, however long that is. So in general, though, those are the stages that he put out. So how I use this specifically is for what people should expect and how they can judge where their life is. And these are things where people might come with a crisis that is actually a normal process of moving from one stage to the next, and they are experiencing that as a crisis, but it's actually very normal and likely that they'll be fine. So to hear those words is helpful. So if somebody has graduated from college, if somebody is having a baby, if kids moved out and there's no one at home anymore and the couple's alone, these kind of stages are part of a normal process of family development and human development that create crisis, but it actually is meant to push you to the next stage of development. And it's healthy and it's normal. It's how you deal with the stage that's going to give you the results to carry on later. So I use this to just teach them all those and then say, look, do you see how you're right here at this stage right now? Does that make sense? And it's like a light bulb, and oh, makes sense. And nothing changed other than information that helped them build meaning and purpose around what was happening in their life at that point. Does that make sense? Can you see how this information might be applied? Is there any way you could actually see using this to help another person? Any examples?
Yes. And isn't it there a verse in Romans where it talks about every man in their heart has the Lord, has that gap that only God can fill. Isn't there a verse where no matter if you try to deny it, it's there? Where I get a little bit confused is I personally have never, and I didn't grow up really in a Christian home, but I didn't think I was an animal, and I never met anybody who thought they was an animal. I never did.
She's talking about evolution, like, for instance, if you evolved.
I never met nobody like that.
Nobody admit that. That's the react and act.
Yeah.
Say that I'm an animal, but reactions because the subconscious mind is built up to that framework.
They got that?
Yeah.
Well, and it may be that a lot of people that you are surrounded by believe that God created people. Because, not just Christianity, but the Catholic religion is another religion that believe that God created people. So that could be just your context, but there's a huge percentage, and I would say, definitely like 30s and under, that don't even have the concept at all that God created the world. It's not there. They didn't have Sunday school, and they think it's just ridiculous that somebody would think of such a thing. And they believe that humans invented God to feel better. And that if you are truly intelligent and use your brain, that you would know evolution is true, and that we evolved, and that we are higher than animals, but we are just a higher being. And so that's going to impact us more and more. Yeah. And maybe not right now in your sphere, but our whole society is being impacted, but we will meet it much more often. And so, and like Alex said, you might not have a conversation where they're saying, well, I'm just an animal, so I'm going to do whatever I want. But beliefs that, well, men will do what they're going to do. What can you do? So men are allowed to be promiscuous and to, sow their wild oats and, concepts of, well, it's just innate in them. Their sex drive's too much for them to control. So, oh, well, they can have affairs. They can, be into pornography. There's allowances given. Well, what is that based on? Are men allowed to do that because of anything in Scripture, or a society has built around that it's fine? The general consensus that there's not a big deal to have sex. Anytime, anyone, no big deal. It is not. Who are you to say that that's wrong? And what we are allowing in sex, the range, the 50 Shades of gray, what is common and okay is different now. And I don't think that came quickly. I think it was slow over a process of fundamental beliefs being changed. Morality and fabric of morality taken out.
50 Shades of Grey, it's about sex, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. Or rape, one or the other. So, okay, so I think you'll probably see it more often.
Maybe I'll see it more often, like you said. Well, I like that Eric stages of development. The previous one, it had middle age, 35 to 55. I like that. Because in that next one, man, it's like 55 to death.
Yes. Yep. All right. I really appreciate this because, I have met people here and I watch them. Doesn't mean I have great tools necessarily out of this, but I can watch them and see what they're struggling with and their life changes. But sometimes, not always, sometimes just knowing that it's a typical process everybody goes through is helpful. It is comforting. And that's usually how I use this. I definitely use it when it comes to kids and creating a perspective in the parent's mind of where things fit and what to expect. If they're still throwing temper tantrums as they get older, there's a problem.
Yeah.
If they're 2, we're okay. Okay.
This will be our lesson as we go one more time, or?
You know what? There is so much. I am filtering to pick the best. So this is an example, but I probably will not bring it up again, just because we've already gone through it. Okay?
I always was curious about the infants, like, how they did experiments and no touching, no nothing. I mean, I guess there's hope with Jesus and God because I've heard of horror stories where it was just so awful. So is the majority, would you say, you're messed up for life? Because
No.
I've seen the infants. I remember meeting one where they never got the kid out of the crib or anything. So are they messed up for life? It almost seems that could be.
Well, it may be because of their current environment. Because sometimes when you have that, you end up in a life like that forever. But there's absolutely a ton of hope, and this is new. There didn't used to be this stuff. So actually, that's the next step, brain development. So this I probably will repeat because I'll put it into a broader context. Sure. What I'm going to do with human development is go through linear infancy, childhood, and pull out the nuggets in each age. That's how I'm going to go through human development.
This is about when we got.
That's about what you have, yes. So brain development. So I just wanted to give a concept really quick about how the brain develops.
This also from Erickson, or this is something?
No, totally separate. Just to give you a context of brain development, that's it. It comes into human development. Obviously, if you're starting at, conception, and then in the womb, the baby's growing, that's where you start brain development, actually. And what's interesting is the part of the brain that is connecting, making the connections in your brain for sound start in the womb. We know this. They hear the voice. Well, how senses and how connections are made in the brain is through exposure. So how they learn hearing and develop their hearing to improve is by hearing. That's it. No, you don't have to work hard at it. They will learn how to hear and improve their hearing by hearing. They will learn how to see and improve their sight by seeing. It'll happen naturally by being exposed. They will develop their sense of touch and make the connections in their brain for that sense by touching and having someone touch them. Okay, so what's really fun is all the work the brain does happens very automatically. You don't have to do much to have it work. But you do have to give them the ability to see and smell and touch. Everything does have to be there, but it's just actually exposure. So what happens in the brain, though, is anytime you learn something, which is basically you being exposed to something, it makes a connection in the brain. It is different from infancy, basically 0 to about 6 years, than it is for the rest of your life. Before 6 years is what they will call the hardwiring of the brain, and it's different than the last part of your life. The next kind of big jump is later in adolescence, and we'll talk about that in a sec. So 0, right when they're born, and actually before they're born, with hearing and other types of senses are still being developed. Right when they're born, the minute they open their eyes, sight begins to develop. They have terrible vision, but it does not take long. All those connections, they're neurons that don't have a job yet. They are neurons that are meant to communicate that don't have a job until they are exposed to seeing, and then they say, I'm a vision neuron, and they go to work. And so everything that the child experiences from 0 to 6, everything that they experience is a connection. To where if you're looking at the brain connections, that it's like, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened. It would be so many connections, it's ridiculous. Way more than actually an adult brain. Overboard, way more than they need. And then right about age 6, it's not a guarantee, it's a range, there's a pruning process. And whatever has been repeated and that the child's been exposed to more often remains. And what is very minimal is pruned away and tossed out. And that is the foundation of the brain that everything else in their life is built on top. This is why if children learn a language younger, the younger they learn it, the easier it is for them to learn, and multiple languages. People will be scared, like, oh no, what if they're confused? There is nothing that they can be confused about. The brain is a sponge, able to do whatever at that point. It's just, it's soaking up everything. So it's perfectly easy for somebody to learn however many languages you want to have them learn in those early years. And even if they hear it and they don't learn the language, it's going to be a better chance that they can learn it later and actually pronounce it, whatever they're exposed to. Not once, saturated with. The most that they're exposed to will remain. Also, music. If they're exposed to music at that early age, that actually stimulates the same part of the brain that later is used to understand and grasp science. Same part of the brain that you would use to understand analytical thinking, science, chemistry, those kinds of math problems, the same part of the brain. So what's funny about these teach your child to read, is that music is much more going to prepare them later for being intelligent than memorizing a word, that too. But, we still have our fads. And I would say there are cultures that recognize this, and the only thing is, so music, how powerful it is at those early ages. It can build in a hard wiring for intelligence if they're exposed to music in those early years. The only thing is, what is more powerful than music? Can you think back to what I've talked about already? What would be more powerful than music to prepare a healthy brain ready to learn later?
Scripture?
Well, sure, scripture. I mean, biologically, what? Nope. Speech is actually something, yes. But something more important.
Taste?
Nope. Play. There's nothing more powerful than play. Jumping, rolling, hitting, touching, moving, big, huge motor skill kind of play to create the hardwiring in the brain, laying a foundation for future development. So that's the only problem. Sometimes you have cultures that know the value of music, but sometimes at the expense of playing. So you have to keep playing there still, but music is powerful. It is the same part of the brain that later they'll be able to actually learn more through some of the science and mathematical kind of concepts that they'll learn. Same area of the brain. Prepares them more. 0 to 6. What is repeated is kept. What is not is pruned away, and that's the hardwiring. Here's what's fun. That is a hardwiring. If a child had trauma, that hardwiring would look different. As an adult, you could take the scan of a brain of a person that had trauma as a child, scan of a brain of a person that did not, and they would be physically different. Forever, they will have consequences. It'll get better instead. There was a study done through Kaiser. It's called the ACE study. And what was great about this study is they gave surveys to every single person that ever came in. Usually there's such a limited population that you could say, well, it doesn't apply to me because that was only innate. This was people, kids, adults, elderly. It was psychiatric, and I have a toothache. I mean, it was every person coming to Kaiser, and there was a huge sample populations. I think it was over 10,000 people that they interviewed and gave the survey. And what they're looking for is patterns in their life impacts from being in trauma as a child. And trauma could be child abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. They kind of defined it in various areas. And what they found were 24 items that came up as significant that people who had trauma as a child were negatively impacted in their life. And they range from keeping a job, mental health problems, just a huge range of problems in functioning in life that was so overboard in statistics, jumping out as a pattern directly tied to whether they had trauma as a child. And when that study came out, it changed, how we viewed things a little bit, because now we saw how important it was. Of course, that makes sense. The trauma is going to have a huge impact on kids and later adult functioning, but I don't think they were expecting it to be as significant as what they found.
What degree of trauma?
There was a range. So it demonstrated that. So the more severe the trauma, the more people struggled in these areas and had multiple struggles. So out of 24, somebody would decrease. It was very much what you would expect. The lower levels of trauma would be matched with less of these items identified. So the more severe the trauma, the list would grow in their difficulties. So there's not many things you can tie like that on research so clearly as a causation. Yeah, it kind of relates, but this is very much tied. If you want to really mess up a person's life, have trauma in their life as a child. You're pretty much guaranteed. Now, here's where the positive side comes in. How the brain works. We used to think if you burn all your cells using drugs, then you're out of luck. Okay? We thought that once you killed brain cells, there was no rejuvenating them. It was over. Sorry, tough luck. We believed that for a long time. Very recently, with the studies in neuroscience, do we now know that you can regenerate neurons, that you can restructure your brain and re-hardwire your brain. So this is new, and it's called neuroplasticity, that the brain is like plastic, and it can mold, and it can adjust, and it can overcompensate, and there is absolutely hope. So how do you do it? I'll give you one example. A lot of times, the difficulty is childhood, and there's nothing more powerful. I would say I could demonstrate this through research, but then the relationship with parents. There's a whole theory out there, attachment theory, and there's a lot underneath that as well that show how you bond and attach with your parent is going to impact your later life. Well, with a lot of the difficulties that come and how it changes the brain, if somebody, very specifically, there was a study with alcoholic parents. So if you had an alcoholic parent, your brain actually looks like you had trauma in your childhood. So whether the alcoholic parent thought they were traumatizing you or not, then it actually does show up as trauma. And what they found that if that person developed a healthy relationship with another that was similar to like a dad would be, that the brain naturally adjusted to look like a normal, healthy brain. Nothing magical. A healthy, strong relationship. A normal, healthy, strong relationship with another person similar to what they lacked when they were a child. Naturally, the brain adjusted and re-hardwired to look like a healthy brain. So that is one very specific way, is to have healthy relationships. The difficulty is, remember, everything's connected, where you don't just have a person outside of their environment. The environment is always a part of it. So a lot of times, if you have trauma as a child, you have unhealthy ways of behaving that keep you trapped in unhealthy environments. So what type of relationships do you have? Are those strong, healthy relationships that are helping you heal? No, not typically. It would take a lot for a person to say, wait, I'm super unhealthy, I'm going to go find a therapist and get help, and I'm going to go, you know, meet a really healthy person, and we're just going to connect, and then I'm going to have a healthy relationship and be healed. They're not going to do that. So, you know, I as I'm talking out loud, I'm just thinking about our relationship with God. I would love to do a neuroscience study on a person's relationship with God, if that could hardwire their brain. That's just random. I just thought of that. That'd be so fun.
Is that what we use for repentance?
What was that?
Repentance. People come back to God. Repentance.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah. Well, because obviously we know, having nothing to do with brain science, we know, we've watched many times, and I mean, it is in scripture, renew your mind is actually precedence for it, definitely. But we become a new creation, you know, that a person, however bad off they were, we have seen their whole life transformed because of relationship with God. I would be very curious if their brain changed. Thank you, guys. That's fun. I'm going to have to calm myself down and remember what I'm talking about, because I will go off somewhere else. But that would actually be very fun.
I was also thinking how important it is, like when we were in children's ministries and stuff like that, as a Christian adult, how impactful that could be if you built good relationships with whatever age it was.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That can be healing them. That would be a good thing, which would be following scripture.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, you know, somebody who didn't have a dad, I know, you know, our family is sensitive to that. That's in scripture. You know, make sure you take care of the fatherless. But it's really important. If they don't have that significant person in their life, there's still going to be consequences with all of this. There's still going to be consequences, but they can have a better chance. They can have a better life if they have another person replacing, you know, spending time caring for them as that was meant to be, as they were supposed to have had and didn't have. So I think that's a powerful way that this can be applied, is that every time we build a strong relationship with another person that has any type of these struggles in their past, that can really make a huge impact in the future.
And you hear a lot of testimonies where people say, if they wouldn't have believed in me, I wouldn't have.
Yes.
Look how far I got. They have that they have that healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Co-chairs or Sunday school teachers.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's both, right? You have the one teacher that said, you can't do this, you're not smart enough. You know, or you have the one teacher that said you can do anything. So our influence on people's life is so much greater sometimes than we realize. Yeah. And I definitely say that all the time to counselors, but for you guys, I think it's the same, is, you know, we have an opportunity to make just a huge impact in people's lives. It's there. They will come. You know they're going to come, so it's powerful. But as much as the brain is able to be plastic and repair itself, sometimes it does not. And it's called resiliency in psychology, and some people have it and some people don't. So that's the difficulty, is that you can have somebody with trauma that for some reason, whatever you build around them and whatever interventions you try, they still significantly struggle forever. and they get saved, they have a good relationship with God, and they're still struggling. I've seen schizophrenics where they hear voices even on medication. Like, I'm not even a huge fan of medication, but I know, typically if you have somebody who's schizophrenic, there is, there's a level of dopamine that you can mess with in the brain. You can give them a synthetic version of a medication, and it could actually stop the voices. Now, whether that helps them in the long run or not, that's the debate. But it can stop the voices, and it can stop them seeing things. Those symptoms can go away. Well, I've had people so severe that it didn't matter what medication or anything anybody tried, they were always going to hear voices, period. Nothing else helped. So there is a point that we don't have a tangible way to define when nothing is helping, and that person is going to have that consequence. And I don't see it as sin, as far as I don't see it as their sin. I see it as part of the world. My broad perspective that sin is in the world and everything is falling apart and terrible things happen. So I see some things, somebody is in an addiction, sure, maybe their sin is keeping them trapped. But for some things, you can watch how it's been a family, family situation where there was child abuse and other stuff that you can't pin the person as their sin, but it's sin. That makes sense. And that it's going to last, and the consequences will still be there, even with repentance, even with God, because that's up to Him. And I always say God can heal whoever He wants to, but sometimes He doesn't. So,
would you say that that's why you might have 5 different people you're working with? Some are hardwired different than others. Some give up addictions easily, and others, no matter how hard they try, never do.
yes. Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to that hardwiring.
It does, but to be honest, I'd even take it back to Erickson a little bit, because how you believe about yourself impacts that as well. So if some of the core issues started at infancy, then within them, for some reason, because some still pull out of it, they lack the perception in their mind that says, I can do this. Rather, they have, I always fail. I always do it again. I'm just going to fail again. I think you can pray for it. I think you can control it. I think that how we think is something that we have the ability to control. And, I believe that I would draw on God, that, trying in my own power is going to be too much. So if I thought of sin nature versus the Spirit taking over my life, and being led by the Spirit, that my sin nature, what is from my childhood, what is from my habits, what is always easy for me, that's actually biologically easier in my brain, because when we do stuff again and again, we build physical grooves in our brain. And for us to do something new is to be on top of this dip. And it's so easy in our brain physically, the chemical, like going from one place to the next, it's easier to go in the dip. To come out on top of here and start something new is so difficult. So we have basically every angle against us, that it would need to be something outside of ourselves, a power that's greater than us to help us in this situation. So for me, though, like in my relationship with God, very specifically with my thinking, I remember coming to the grips that I could control my thoughts, because I believed that it was the environment, that something was so terrible, it was too big for me, I was overwhelmed, I didn't like it, and so what could I do? I felt like I didn't have control over that. And then it was a realization that, no, I could actually right now think differently if I wanted to. Like physically, I am able to think differently right now. And doesn't mean that made a difference right away. But when I started, I picture it, because I have to be extreme to keep things, like slapping myself, knock it off. That's ridiculous. It's not true. And you have had times in a Christian context, you probably told people to call on the promises of God, or to fight lies with truth. These are some of the concepts that come out of what will be called cognitive behavior therapy. And so it's the concepts that how we're interpreting things, what we think about, all of that impacts everything in our life, and we can control it. So usually what's negatively impacting us is a lie. If it's a lie, it's from Satan. And it does not belong in our thinking, but we've lived with it for so long. So to fight the lies with truth, I think that is a theory, but how would you fight lies with truth if you didn't have scripture? What you would do is think rational, irrational. But who decides rational, irrational? But this is what they do. They think, okay, well, that's irrational. Here's something rational. Replace it. You're not a failure. You have failed. And it sounds good. So I'm not a failure. I've just made mistakes. I'm not a failure. I've just made mistakes. Well, what if you actually had specific truth that you could replace with your lives? And that's where the power of scripture can come in. And we know that the Bible doesn't turn up void. So not only are we trying to get away from our thinking that is a lie, but we're replacing it with truth that by itself has a power that is beyond anything else somebody can give us.
In your study, would you be putting the verses like in a column that would relate to that?
Yes, I actually have a collection of about 34 mini books from June Hunt because I really like them. And so it won't address everything, so I'll probably have to, I want to write my own, but depending on time, I'm going to pull resources. But hers have all the verses at the beginning lined up. So I'm definitely not duplicating a topic she's already done because she does a great job listing the verses. So for certain topics, we'll have that, but then other we'll bring it.
When you're saying about the brain, drugs is a whole different story, right?
Nope.
When the mom takes drugs, I mean, she messes up the
Oh,
brain
sure.
of the infants.
So you have different ways, of doing damage, and chemicals in your brain is different than physical damage to your brain. So, like for instance, drinking in the womb could do physical damage that is typically not reversible ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So some drugs, but some it is. And just for example, Alzheimer's, dementia. There's no cure for Alzheimer's, correct?
Right.
But we can actually slow the process down tremendously by the interactions we have in using our brain. We never thought that before, but now we know we can. How we believe about cancer can impact whether we die of cancer. There is a connection with our thoughts physically and our immune system. It is really fascinating. So the same part in our spinal cord, where you have the information going from thoughts to your body is first chemicals in your brain and then electricity going through your spinal cord out. Well, it overlaps with the immune system. So it's actually a very physical thing here, but the idea is somehow we do not have this figured out. Everybody pretends we do, we don't. But there is a connection with our thinking, our perception on life, and our immune system, more than just a stress response we talked about family conference. And so in studies on a consistent basis, if people thought there was hope to be healed from cancer, they were healed from cancer much more often. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. And so to understand these, I do think they have great relevance. And if there's a message louder than all the rest, is that we can change what we think. Yeah. We act like it's futile. Well, I don't have that power. Well, yeah, you do. You have Christ inside you. You have the Holy Spirit. And you can literally tell yourself, knock it off. That's ridiculous. And I think it goes along the lines of what we think about, have such a huge impact. Scripture says that. Well, we are thinking all the time. Are we thinking, well, I'm just a failure. I might as well give up now. I can't do anything about it. So-and-so did that. So-and-so did that. So-and-so, blaming everybody else in the whole wide world. We will have consequences for that. If we keep that responsibility and focus on how we're thinking, we will have consequences. But I will say, along those lines, there's no way I can, in the amount of time I'll have, even a year, give you everything I want you to have. So along with giving you gold nuggets, I will want to build within you the ability to find verses, the ability to know a biblical worldview without me. you know, I will want you to have the tools to filter just as much as I have. You know, that will be a part of my goal. Just so that, you know, if I disappear, you're fine. You're like, it'll take me a while, but I've got my Bible and I've got Google. We'll do this, you know, that you can start learning the system that I'm taking, that you could use it and continue more than what I can offer. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Okay. Social psychology. So social psychology, remember, was the profession that kind of came out of World War II and people wondering, how did they get all these people to obey Hitler and kill and murder? And so there's a lot of studies and there's a lot of research that I think are some of the most valuable information to impact our lives that I've seen come from this field. And they match up, all of them match up very much, because they're looking at just like the innate kind of drives of humans, what motivates them. So if we can come with scripture with everything we already know, I think it's going to be fun. One little one that I just love is the fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error says that it is typically, actually that's good. We tend to interpret other people's failures based on their internal qualities. You got fired because you're a terrible worker. And we tend to base our failures based on situational reasons. I got fired because that boss never liked me in the first place. He was always out to get me. And so naturally, this is a pattern in people, and I think it's just fascinating. And so where the application comes in is pay attention, okay? So you can think of other examples, and there's other terms for this, but fundamental attribution error is the most known. So then also, you know, opposite's true. When I succeeded, I'm fantastic. Look how great I did. It's because I'm so smart that I accomplished that. Another person accomplished it, and we would more likely, well, you know, he has a very supportive family, and all these things work together just for them to be successful at that. And so these are things it's just a trend that is.
I was very fascinated about reading this you sent this afternoon. In those last 24 years dealing with the people, I have my own experience and theory that resonated with me. Is this actually, we judge other people based upon their actions. Mm-hmm. We judge ourselves based upon our intentions.
Very good. It's very similar. Yes, that's exactly the same
thing. I saw this. Okay, this is my theory. I didn't know that about fundamental attribution or any of those
good.
Things. Because I observe people.
I like that.
Other people also, because jumping with the judgment actually, then they can their choice. They didn't have an opportunity to explain their side.
Yes.
I had all the reasons myself actually. Every day I see this, you know.
Yeah.
And I always tell the people, and I said, you should be judged others, you know. So otherwise, no, this is true. Because I know it's scientific.
Yep. See? And so it also reminds us, we could have thought of this, you know, if we were sitting down thinking enough. Yes, very good, very good. So in application 2, I use it to be careful not to judge others, to remember there's a bigger situation, you know. And I always use this example with counselors. I worked at a bank, and there was a guy that was so rude, so just very, very rude. And I was in the middle of my school, so it was fresh, you know, in my mind. So I wanted to yell at him for being rude, but instead I said, you know, are you okay? Have you had a bad day? Why are you so grouchy? And he said, yeah, my wife died. And it was just like, oh, man. And it clicked in my brain, pay attention, Julie. Don't just presume, like, what a rude guy. Always be thinking, I wonder what the situation is behind it. So purposely countering what's natural, because there's probably a situation behind it. Sometimes there's not, but many times there is. And, you know, so that's the best way I found to use it, is to not judge quickly, to think there might be more to the story than what I see initially. Group dynamics. So these are just fun little pieces. Now, again, in social psychology, you're going to get 7 weeks. There's some great, great tools that come out of social psychology, and one has to do with groups. And sometimes it's applied to businesses and churches and things like that as well. But social loafing if we were a group and we're supposed to get something done, naturally everybody would do less work. That makes sense.
Everybody's business is nobody's business.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yep. And with this, you have to think, well, of course, a lot of this is just logical, okay? Groupthink, though, is you tend to go along with the group. Well, where this came in helpful was with juries in court systems, because you could have a jury come to a terrible decision if one person has a terrible decision in their mind. They don't actually sit, and if social psychology was never discussed in the court system, then, or applied in the court system, then it would be normal and natural for a group to come together, start talking about the evidence, and then mold to the majority, maybe just based off one person, having nothing to do with the evidence, but more about the interactions of the people and how the conversation was going. And there's a great video, old video, 10 Angry Men. Does that sound familiar? Very worth watching, 10 Angry Men. And it's this whole process of these men sitting in the courtroom to say this person is guilty of murder, and what they're using to say that. And there's one person that's against it, trying to mold the rest of the group. Well, in some of the experiments, one example, you can watch this on YouTube, but there's college students sitting down, and so most of the people know that they're part of the study, and one person doesn't. So everybody else in the study is planning on saying an incorrect answer on purpose, and then one person is they're experimenting on. So they all come and sit down, and they present it as if it's a study for something totally different, and they say, which line is longer? And they go around, and at first everybody's on board. They are saying that line's longer, that line's longer. Of course it is, it's very obvious. Then they say which line's longer, and starting from one side, they pick the wrong one. It's obviously wrong, and they pick the wrong one, but they go around, and sure enough, the person might even look baffled and confused, but they give the wrong answer. They follow the group, and that was pretty consistent. So that's something we can recognize and see. Group dynamics are powerful. We will do something against what we think is true because of a group. Okay? And also with groups, just a little extra is, if somebody's hurt on the side of the road and you're in a group, you're more likely to walk past and not help them. If you are alone and somebody's hurt, you will feel like you need to stop and help them. Some of these were applied later in first aid. Now, switched from tell somebody to call 911 to you have to say, you in the blue shirt, call 911. Because what they find is people were yelling for somebody to call, and everybody would figure somebody else is calling, and you don't take responsibility for it because there's more than one person. Mm-hmm. So some of these dynamics came very helpful to be applied to other areas like first aid. So what I think is fun, though, is not only do we see trends in people, but we have tools to combat it. So with groupthink, if you had a group and you wanted them to come up with something useful, you don't want them all to just think one way for no good reason. What you could do is, in that group, you could encourage dissent. As a group leader, you could say, I'd love for you guys to disagree. I want to see you disagree so we can come to a good conclusion in the end. You can call on each member to express something objective. So naturally, they will all merge together. You can actually ask, is there one thing that you would do different? And bring out objectives on purpose. You can communicate. The leader doesn't communicate aside. Don't tell them ahead of time what you want. They will mold into that to please you. Divide into several smaller groups and then come back. And you can appoint a devil's advocate. So this is just one strategy you can use for business and meetings and any kind of group environment. If you have a group, it's going to be likely to all merge together, and there's no reason for you to have a group to discuss the situation. You could have just come up with it on your own. So if you want to have it be more effective, you can implement these strategies. Okay? Any questions on that? Makes sense? That goes for brainstorming too. If you want to brainstorm, it's actually not effective in a group format. It's more effective individually. and have all your brainstorming done before you come to a group. If you brainstorm in a group, it will be less productive. Okay, obedience studies. If you want it's social psychology, different from group. Obedience studies has to do with how do you get somebody to obey you. Okay, people use this on us all the time. Con artists and thieves and everybody else is using this. So one is to be in a place of authority, that people think you're in authority. To wear a uniform is another way, and Hitler used this. Used authority and definitely used uniform. And as you, not just you as the person in authority wear a uniform, if everybody else wears a uniform, it's more likely they're going to do whatever they're told than if they had clothes that were separate from others. Interesting. Okay? Direct instructions. Do this. People get uncomfortable going against what somebody's directly telling them to do with no hesitation. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. I'm the expert. Do this. And then distance from those impacted. So the fun experiment done on this topic was they had a person in the box. It's actually the voice of the guy from I Love Lucy, not Ricardo, but the other one. But he was in one side, or his voice was over there. And they would have a person come in, and the thing was the person being harmed was separate. They couldn't see the person being harmed. They could just hear him. So that's important, that distance. And then they would come in, and they had this whole lie, set up. This why they were there. We're going to have a test on memory. We're teaching these people they want to have a better memory, and the person would electrocute the individual on the other side. If they had a correct answer, they were fine. If they had an incorrect answer, they had to push a button to electrocute them. And on it said a certain voltage all the way up to careful they'll die, like kind of a thing. And every time they would electrocute them, the voice would scream, help, 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 that hurts, help, please stop, please stop. So the person came in and wore a white lab coat, was a doctor, was a professor, so had authority, had, no big deal. Okay, please continue to do it, please continue, yep, hit the, are you going to do this or not? And even if the person was uncomfortable, they would obey, and they would electrocute this person on up into high voltage. And so with this study, we just saw this typical human characteristic that we could obey against everything we would normally do based off certain situations. And these are some of the factors that came into play to create that environment. So this is important because, there's even shows that make fun of this, but in a very sad way, where they'll take people's money because they dress up like a cop and stand out in front of the bank with a security deposit and say, oh, it's broke, just put it in there. They're not a cop. They just have to use by the people who will put their money in there and walk away. They can trust them. He has a uniform. Things like that where people are being duped all the time and conned. So to build in that critical thinking, that analytical thought process to say, I don't care if you're in a uniform, I'm thinking this through, and that's difficult because you want, in a sense, for people to feel safe, teach your kids, go to a police officer. Well, you have to build in some critical thinking there as well. And then also just in general, to watch, when this is being used other places, to recognize it and not be fooled into doing something you would not normally do just because they're creating this environment for you. Okay, powerful. But it helped us to understand why what happened in Germany happened. And it helps me to not judge, because if there's any message social psychology says is you think you wouldn't do something, but given certain circumstances, you probably would. And so that helps. And I like to be the one person that wouldn't do it. But statistically speaking, people do these patterns again and again and again because the situation is set up in a certain way. So I can have less judgment of somebody realizing that there's more to the story most likely. I'm going to think through what I shared just because it's going by so fast. I'm going to come back to some of the others, but with crisis intervention, There's wonderful tools, and what's fun about crisis intervention is you can have, easy like 5 years straight on it. There's so many different crisis situations. With every crisis situation, there's kind of a uniqueness to how you might want to handle it. But in that class, I will specifically address key crisis situations. And within the crisis situations, you'll have, in a broad sense, what to do always with crisis, and then specifically with the topics we'll cover, like domestic violence and addiction, certain kind of crisis, we will say, here's some common themes out of this crisis that you should know and understand, and here's some best strategies. So we'll pull themes, because everybody's situation could be unique, but I think there's enough themes out there to give you a good amount of information on the most common crisis situations. How to handle if somebody's suicidal, how to handle if they're stuck in a domestic violence relationship. There's key crisis situations if they've had the death of a loved one, that there's plenty of tools to give you for those circumstances. So more tangible. But some of the broad themes are helpful too. And the idea of helping them keep their power is important. When somebody's in crisis, they might not be able to think or do anything. So in counseling, you never do something for a client. You're not going to help them balance their checkbook. In crisis intervention, you might. You're going to do whatever it takes to keep that person stable to make it to the next day. So you will do a lot more for that client than you normally would, but you never do for somebody what they can do for themselves. So if they need to call somebody, if they can call, have them call. If they can't, call the person. Funeral arrangements, whatever it might be. If they are capable, don't do it for them. Because whatever power they can keep is going to help in their strength and their perception of themselves to be able to do stuff. But there will be more times in crisis that you might help a person in a way that seems too much. How can I help them? Well, because the kids are not going to be safe if you don't. So help them. But once they're stable, once their kids are safe, don't do it if they can do it. Another trick for you is to understand right brain, left brain. Left brain is only the feeling of just satiation, satisfied. Strong emotions are in the right brain. So if they're sad, if they're frightened, if they're angry, strong emotions are on the right hemisphere of the brain. In the right hemisphere of the brain is also creativity, music, other similar qualities. On the left is the analytical, math problems, language. So we can go more later, but if you understand the difference between what's in the right brain and the left brain, if somebody is so far emotional that they can't pull out of it, you can give them a task that makes them use their left brain, and it can pull them out of the emotions. This could be very important if somebody has such devastating loss that they might be suicidal. If they are so far into their emotions that they can't function, maybe they have kids and they can't pull it together, but they have to go home and their kids are going to be there. That they're so deep in their strong emotions, they can't stay there. They need to come out. You can have a strategy to pull them out of the emotions by giving them a task that uses their left brain. It could be a math problem. It could be sometimes having them talk. If they talk, they're actually using their left brain. So you could give them some kind of a problem they have to figure out. Get them to talk about, something that has them analyze or figure something out, problem solve. They will be talking, and as they're doing so, they will become less emotional because it's moving into a whole different hemisphere. There are times you might want them to get into emotions because they have become so numb. They're not thinking about emotions. They don't want to feel emotions. They're just all in their head, and they're not going to go to emotions. You can either listen to music or do something creative like paint or draw or color that could actually move them into emotions. So if you understand the difference between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, you can move people from one side to the other by activities that you get them to do. So you don't have to have this memorized. I'm giving you a glimpse at some of the tools that can come out of these. Any feedback on that? If you ever thought of that, I might have even talked about it. a little bit. I've used it. I've used it where you have people draw, if they're right dominant, draw with their left hand with a crayon, and color with their left hand actually gets them in touch with their emotions. But more often, I'm trying to get them out of their emotions. Okay? If there's anything that you could do to be good at crisis intervention, is to know the resources in your community. So, and that will work on strategies for finding that. How can you know who to refer a person to? Because you might have somebody come with just a myriad crisis situation. So how can you build a network where you know who to refer them to? That's your best tool you can have as somebody that's going to be ready to handle crisis. There's so much. So I'll give you 2 more. I think I could do this in 3 minutes, and then we have a tiny bit of time. Motivational interviewing. This is an example of a theory, okay? And motivational interviewing is the theory, and then there's techniques you can use. The theory I like, but of course, you know, we need something broader. It's one little tiny theory. The theory is, what's the point of helping somebody if they don't want help? So instead of focusing on getting to goals and what you're going to do, you focus on where are they at on their motivation level, and how can I increase their motivation to want to change? If I increase their motivation to change, then I can we can work quickly because they're ready, and then I can give them tools. So almost all of the theory is techniques move somebody from not even seeing they have a problem to wanting to make a change and trying to change. The theory does not come with a lot of techniques for actually how to change, just how to increase motivation. But it's wonderful, because how many people don't see that they have a problem? So and here's the fun part when this came in. Before, you wouldn't help the person. If they didn't see they had a problem, as a counselor, you'd say, all right, go home then. I don't want to see you till you know you have a problem. So addictions, people that are maybe arrogant or prideful, they might have significant problems, but because they didn't admit to it, counselors wouldn't help them. But maybe it's impacting their family, maybe it's impacting so many people around them. So what this did is it gave a tool to counselors for the times they had a client that didn't even see they had a problem. For counselors, they might have people mandated by court to be there, convinced it was the court's fault, not their fault. So this was a wonderful tool. So I'll give you one example. We said it already, I think, because it's my favorite. If there are 2 opposing or contradictions in the person, then you say them out loud together so the person realizes that they're contradicting themselves. So in addictions, this is common, that they will say, I don't have an addiction. I don't know what everybody's problem is. I'm fine. I can stop if I want to. Nothing bad's ever happened. I'm not harming anyone. So they have this lingo. But as they're talking, there'll be pieces that you pull out that are opposite of that. For example, you might hear that they have a DUI and it's costing them a lot of money. They might have lost their job. They might be at threat of losing their family. And there's all these negative consequences over here. The person has both of these things, but they don't put the 2 closely together. They know these bad things are happening and they're mad at it for happening, but they don't connect it with their behavior. So if you can put the 2 together and say, I'm confused. You said there's no negative consequences, but you're losing your family. Does it not bother you that you're losing your family? Help me understand this. And what's fun about this is that it's not confrontational in a power struggle. It's Columbo. You guys know Columbo, I'm sure. Does that sound Columbo? And he just act like a baffling idiot the whole time. But then at the end he'd go, one more question. And then whatever that question was, it blew the whole case wide open. So that's the style where you're like, I don't get it. I'm so confused. You're not confused. You're a strategist, but you're being gentle with them instead of if think of all these people that think they don't have a problem. If you say yes, you do, I'm going to list you 5 reasons that you have a problem. They don't care. They heard nothing. nothing went into their brain when you were talking. If you say, you have to help me. I'm sorry. I'm very confused. You have to help me. Tell me how this and this fit together. There's something called cognitive dissonance. If two opposing things come together in your brain, you will wrestle with them. You can't figure it out. You're going to wrestle. I don't know. How do those fit together? And either you will change your belief system, never mind, or you will change your behaviors typically. Those two opposing things won't last. You'll wrestle and try to figure it out. So this is capitalizing on that natural process. It is saying, okay, you said there's no problem, but I'm hearing 5 problems. Tell me. They're doing the work for you. Tell me how those fit. That person will have a hard time talking about it. They will go home and wrestle, and they will be a little bit more closer to recognizing they really do have a problem. So that's just one problem, one tool. There's actually a bunch in there, but we're going to run out of time. There's a bunch of ways that you can help move somebody from, I don't have a problem, to, well, maybe a little problem, on to actually wanting help. Okay? So there's so much that we could go over, and that's one thing I'm wondering, eventually what it'll feel like. I am filtering and only picking my favorites, but still may feel like a lot to take in. So my effort will be to use psychology of memory and learning to help you retain it. I have 11 theories of learning and memory that I know very well that I'm going to be trying to think of how to integrate them to keep whatever you learn in your mind long term. So that'll be something underneath I won't talk about that I'll be trying to do. But there's a lot of information, a lot of tools that after this you can still learn more, but this will be my favorite. This will be the best that I found out of what psychology has to offer. And then building in, the concept of what does Scripture say about it first? Does what we're reading and studying fit within a biblical worldview, and is it useful? Can we turn around and use it?
You do with the personal relationship and personality.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's on my list. It's very helpful. I've used that.
Did you just ask something about the personality?
Yeah.
Like, would you be giving a personality test?
Yeah, that actually would be fun. I'll always have to be deciding what to do that with time, to help it, because it could, everything could take so long. But I absolutely think it would be fun to do a personality test.
Testing and all, that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
It's not that's not the final thing. You can say that these are you are type A, you do always like this one. But you can say that, okay, look at